Hello underachievers! Before we get into the video, I just want to remind you guys that I have tongue ulcers. So if I'm speaking funny, that's why. But yes, just want to remind you guys that I'm going tour in January in the UK. It's going to be the best time and the tickets are only £12. So if you want to grab one, check the link in the description. I guarantee that if you come, you will have a good night. Like, look at this. That hasn't happened to you yet. That hasn't happened to you yet. Can we get some jazz hands in here, please? Can I see the jazz hands, please, Mr. Lightman? Yeah! I love jazz hands. Tell me that wasn't fun. Also, I found my favorite t-shirt, which is very ripped. I wore it to a YouTube convention once like this, and if you didn't know, I am also playing a YouTube convention, Social in the City, in a few weeks. Maybe it's under 2 weeks now, but if you want to grab tickets for that as well, link in the description. So, transphobic TikToks. TikToks which are transphobic. There's a surprising amount of them. Your child was born a male and you're going to raise him as his biological sex. I have a question. What does raising a child as a biological sex mean? Does that mean enforcing gender stereotypes on them? Like those silly little Hooters tops that, you know, straight people put their children in? How do you raise a child as a biological male? Is that just like telling him not to cry when he falls over? I don't know. Let's watch the video. Yep. Okay, so here's why that. Wow, I said that a lot. So this TikTok is transphobic because it perpetuates the idea that trans people actually say these things. I feel like the media has got a real, not a hard on. The media has a real floppy for trans people right now. I feel like they always have, but right now I feel like it's a bad time for trans people because people love to spread things that trans people think and trans people say when, you know, trans people don't really think that. Like, sure, maybe there's one trans person in the entire universe that, you know, thinks it's transphobic to raise your baby boy as a baby boy, and, you know, that's not meaning, like, enforcing gender stereotypes, but just not calling them they, them. But you know what? I spent a lot of last week, probably half an hour, scrolling through this person on Twitter's account, because they thought that they should be able to have sex with animals. So, you know, there may be some people out there who say silly things, but that is not representative of all trans people. A gay man wanting to have sex with a wolf, not representative of all gay men. Okay, but, right. I am a trans person, unfortunately, and I know lots of trans people, fortunately. And, you know, I've never met a trans person who thinks it is transphobic to raise a child born biologically male as a male. Like, what does that mean? I'm still clueless about that. But, you know, as a trans person, controversial opinion, even though it's not a controversial opinion, but I feel like if I had a kid, I would not want to raise them entirely gender neutral. I wouldn't want them to go by they, them pronouns. And I wouldn't want that. I would just, you know, let my kid be happy growing up as whatever they be. And then if they tell me at some point, hey, I'm trans, or hey, I want to use these pronouns, or hey, I'm a bit confused about my gender, then that's the kind of conversation that'll happen. I'm not going to take a newborn child and be like, you are non-binary, and raise them like that, because that's why. There's no need. This TikTok also gives me bad vibes because, you know, she has a child that was born male, and she's very adamant that she's going to raise him as his biological sex. Not to assume anything, but if her child who was born biological male told her, you know, that they may think they're non-binary or something, this would be a very cynical TikTok to see. Like, yeah, I have a son, yeah, he may be non-binary, yeah, he may be trans, but am I going to raise him as a male because he was born that way? Sure, that's the vibe I'm getting. Not a fan. Let's move on. And by move on, I mean move on to the comments, because there are some interesting ones here. So, somebody said, some people shamed me for registering my baby's registry as baby girl. What do you want me to name it? Potato. I don't think that is what trans people want, to be honest. Just a bit confusing, really. Somebody else said, yeah, I'm only 16, but as soon as I have kids, I'm raising them based on the generation I was born into. Not this one, people are too sensitive. Now, so this means absolutely nothing. This is the classic thing that maybe conservatives do, maybe transphobes do, or maybe people that are just like swept up by intolerant media. They do this thing where they argue against a point that hasn't been made. Like, who is telling you it's transphobic to raise your baby boy as a boy? Like, who is telling you that? And I hate the whole idea of like, this generation is too sensitive, because there are sensitive people in every generation. I can assure you, I know a bunch of 80-year-olds who would cry if I told them I was trans. I'd consider that sensitive. Something interesting about Gen Z is that, you know, we've had access to the internet for a large portion of our lives, so we had always had the ability to fact-check things, to learn new things that we weren't taught in school, and, you know, to consider viewpoints that weren't just fed to us by our parents. So maybe we are going to be more sensitive about things like racism and transphobia and homophobia, because I feel like it's a good thing to not like those things. Someone said, my 1.5-year-old daughter likes dirt and monster trucks. Guys, I'm transphobe for putting dresses on her. No one's saying that's transphobic, really. You're kind of just arguing against a brick wall because you want to feel oppressed for whatever reason. I bet every time these people have arguments, they'll sit in the shower for hours on end and, you know, come up with comebacks or things they should have said in the argument. Like, they're so interested in arguing with people. Next TikTok, POV, you wouldn't date a trans woman. Ah, okay. There's this TikTok has many layers, by which it has 2 layers. The first layer is that he wouldn't want to date a trans woman. And the second layer is he says, come on you too. He doesn't want other people to want to date trans women. This is the kind of TikTok that just didn't need to be made. The only reason somebody would make this TikTok is because they want to piss people off because they know it gets views, or they want to attract the kind of people that also enjoy pissing people off because they know it gets views. Like, haha, let me express my controversial opinion that doesn't really affect my life, but I know it will get me attention. You don't have to date trans women. You really don't. You don't have to date anybody you don't want to date. But when your whole thing is telling everybody about how much you don't want to date a trans person, it kind of feels a bit loaded. Like, I would not date somebody that was 6'7" because, you know, I'm 5'5", and that would make me feel extremely insecure. But that does not mean I'm going to spend hours of my life obsessing over the fact and letting everybody know that I wouldn't want to date somebody who's that much taller than me, because it's irrelevant and nobody actually cares. And I understand that obviously trans people aren't a monolith, and there are trans people who think that not wanting to date trans people is transphobic. And I feel like that topic of conversation has so many layers that if you're not actually interested in listening, you're not gonna get it. Yes, I understand genital preferences are a thing. I don't think me, or any trans person I know, in fact, would want you to have to sleep with somebody whose genitals you wouldn't be comfortable engaging with. I don't think anybody wants that. But shut up! I don't think trans women want to date you if you're not into them. I don't think anybody wants to date people that aren't into them. That's not a vibe for anyone. Just giving me transphobe vibes. I just feel like if your entire identity was not wanting to date people with blonde hair, and you kept talking about how you didn't want to date people with blonde hair, at some point, people with blonde hair would be like, hey, wait, why does this guy have something against us? So he doesn't want to date trans women, and he doesn't want you to want to date trans women. Let's go to the comments. Somebody said, no, put me down. Maybe this person wants to date trans women. Somebody else commented, Sarah, she, her, him, they, we, L, RTX 380, RB26, Asus monitor, Supra, Krypton, washing machine, carpet, Battle Academia, Katarina, attack helicopter is typing. Wow, okay. These people are boring and unfunny. So here's a TikTok that is probably well-intentioned, but is absolutely horrifying to watch. So, there's this cis person, and she captioned this video with, I am not transgender, and I'm not claiming to be. This video is to support the transgender community and to educate. So, she's not transgender, she's cis, and she just made a song for trans people. Okay, here it is.
I'm transgender. I didn't identify with my gender. I always felt like I was in the wrong body. I transitioned and became my true self. Now I'm me. I'm transgender.
I don't believe in possession, but I feel like she may be a bit possessed. Transphobic? Maybe not so much. But I did feel attacked by this video somehow. Not in a way that I'm offended by it. I just have too many feelings at this point in time. I don't know, I just feel like if I saw this TikTok when I was 16 and wanted to enliven and could not look at myself in the mirror or leave the house or speak on the phone because I had such bad dysphoria. If I was at that point in my life and I saw this TikTok, I would riot. You would not be able to contain my rage. So here's the first lady again. Let's read this TikTok. You're killing your kids by not letting them transition until they turn 18 and can make an adult decision. So this conversation again, there are way too many layers to it for it to be this simple. Transitioning could mean many different things. Transitioning could be, yes, going on, hormones, getting surgery, but transitioning could also be coming out, changing your names, changing your pronouns, changing the uniform you wear at school, that kind of thing. There's medical transition and there's social transition. The you're killing your kids thing, it comes from a place of, well, you know how 41% of trans people have attempted to commit enlivenment. That is a horrible statistic, but this caption is coming from a place that, we all know that trans kids suffer a lot, and we know that that suffering is greatly helped by being able to transition in whatever little ways are possible. There's data for that. There's so much data behind that. And for this woman to just make a silly TikTok about this, by the way, I'm gonna press play now. She literally doesn't add anything to the conversation. She just dances and holds her middle fingers up to the screen. Trans enlivenment rates are a real problem. Trans mental health issues are a real problem, and they are absolutely made worse by people like this who don't really want to listen to trans people or trans kids because they're too interested in what they think is the right thing to do. I am not at all saying that, you know, if you have a trans kid, you should let them start hormones whenever they want to and let them get surgery whenever they want to. There's more conversation to be had about that, and it entirely depends on the individual, where they are in life, the support system they have. But if you're an adult and you have a kid who tells you that they're trans and you don't let them change their name or their pronouns, or, you know, just change how they dress, or, like, have any little comforts that remove themselves from dysphoria that they experience, then you're kind of just a shitty parent. Like, imagine you have a favourite hat, and you really want your kid to wear your favourite hat, because you like how it looks on them, you think they look cute, they look how you want them to look when they're wearing that hat. But imagine the favourite hat gave them rashes. And you were like, no, you need to keep the hat on. I like how you look in that hat. But they had rashes. They had rashes. They hated the rashes. The rashes hurt them. The rashes made them hate themselves. The rashes meant that they were uncomfortable in every social situation. I just think it's pretty clear that being a transphobe makes you a shitty parent, especially if you have a trans kid. Because changing somebody's name and changing their pronouns and changing how they dress is not irreversible. Doesn't really do damage. It can actually make their life a lot better, but if you refuse to do that, then yeah, you suck. And she commented on her own video saying, not allowing your kids to be confused is not abuse. Sure, they will thank me later. So, I hate that people equate being trans and identifying as trans with confusion. Because I feel like, just in my experience, it took me years and years to actually come out to myself. I refused to believe that I was trans because I knew how difficult that would be, and I knew how much of an effort it would be to have to tell everybody and make everybody call me a different name and make everybody, you know, call me different pronouns and to go through medical services. It was terrifying. The idea of that was terrifying. So even to myself, it was horrible to admit to myself that I was trans. If your kid tells you they are trans, that means that they are entrusting you something very personal to them that you should, you know, kind of respect. If your kid tells you they're trans and you're just like, no, you're confused, you suck. And I'm sure they won't thank you later because you've made it very clear by making these silly little TikToks where you're dancing to things that are really concerning. You've made it really clear that you care more about how you feel towards your child rather than how they feel about themselves. Somebody commented, and especially after all the detransitioners who have come out saying it's negatively impacted them. Come on guys, they'll have all the time when adults. Right. The rate of detransition is so low, it is lower than 1%. Medically speaking, we offer people life-saving treatment when there can even be like a 50% chance that they'll die from that treatment. Do you think that we shouldn't allow any trans kid to change their pronouns or their names or to transition before they turn 18 because less than 1% of them may regret it? You would actually be crazy to do that in the medical field or in any other field. If there's less than a 1% chance of something going wrong, that's a 99% chance that it'll go right. Look at me doing maths. And if you actually look into the studies, you'll find that the majority of the people that detransition end up retransitioning in the future because they actually detransition in the first place because they didn't have any social support. And I don't like the whole, they'll have all the time when they're adults. Sure, like, I'm sure a lot of parents use that excuse. Oh, you can dye your hair when you're an adult. When you move out of my house, you can get a piercing. Sure, those are things that if you're living under your parents' roof and they don't want you to dye your hair red, it's stupid, but I mean, like, that's their rules, that's their house. But, not to make it deep, this video is not supposed to be deep, but a lot of trans kids don't make it to adults. I know a lot of trans adults who, as kids, tried to not be here anymore because of the way that they were treated after telling people that they were trans. Like, it's not as easy as just waiting until you're 18. And if you can do something to help your child's mental health when they're clearly struggling, then you should do that. Someone else said, children aren't allowed to make any lifelong, permanent decision. Why would a transition be different? Changing your name is not lifelong. Changing your pronouns is not lifelong. Getting a haircut is not lifelong. Changing the way you dress is not lifelong. Starting hormone blockers is not lifelong and can actually, you know, save you a lot of hassle in the future. If I started hormone blockers when I was a kid before I started puberty, I would not have to spend £6,000 on getting my tits chopped off. There are so many things that you can do to help out a trans kid that are not lifelong or irreversible. Don't really think I've seen any trans person try and advocate for, you know, literal children getting surgery and hormones. I've never seen that. So let's lighten the mood a bit. This is what I think of when I think of Americans. Not to be Americophobic.
Like, what does it matter what my pronouns are? I get so tired of that shit. What are your pronouns? What are your pronouns? My pronouns are, if you don't know by looking at me, then you're stupid.
I don't know what it is about this woman. I think it might be the southern accent, but I found that really funny. Obviously bad video. Obviously not a good video. Not you didn't say anything good there, buddy. I feel like, yeah, the majority of people in the world will have pronouns that match how they look on the outside in other people's eyes. Like, I have not been misgendered by anybody in public in years, because I look like a he, him, but not everybody with he, him pronouns may look the way that you expect a he, him to look, which is why people will ask about pronouns. Next TikTok says, I'm so embarrassed to live in a generation where if you call someone the wrong pronoun, they'll cry, but if you kill a baby, it's okay. So, again, there are layers to this. There is a very solid and understandable reason why trans people may be upset if you misgender them. You know, if you have gender dysphoria and somebody calls you the wrong pronouns, it hurts. It can hurt, and that's fine. That's a valid thing to feel. But by killing a baby, this person means abortion. This video isn't about abortion, and I feel like I am not gonna get into why being pro-life is silly. So, last video, and what's it about? Yeah, you're right, it's about bathrooms. So, this is a video about bathrooms and trans people.
So we are in middle of nowhere, Georgia, using the bathroom, and you have to get a key for the ladies' room. You do not for the men's room, because you have to prove you're a lady to use the ladies' room.
The vibes were not there, to be honest. That did not give me good feelings. I did not feel happy. I did not feel rumbly in my tumbly. So yeah, if you want to enter the women's bathroom, you have to prove that you are a woman. Feel like I don't need to explain why that's a bad thing. Trans women are actually more likely to be the victims of predators rather than be the actual predators themselves. So let's think about that, shall we? Just because somebody is a trans woman does not mean that she's going to go into the women's bathroom and do bad things. She probably just wants to pee. But yeah, that's the end of the video. Those TikToks, you know, they weren't as fun as I was expecting them to be honest. But can we all collectively laugh in the comments at these transphobes because they don't like being laughed at? So can I get a little ha ha ha, transphobes? But yeah, that was the end of the video. Hope you enjoyed watching it. Jesus Christ. But yeah, have a good day, see you later, losers. Goodbye. Come see me at a gig. It will be so fun and cool.